you start to really evaluate whether or not gamification or a gamified element is right for the product, right for the business, right for the growth.
Yeah, I would be honest here, like before my first instance of research on gamification, in my mind, I thought that when I was going to get into gamification, it would be an entire new milestone. And this research we've done in Amalgama related to this topic came from a need we have on a very specific topic, that it was gamification could be one of the different possible solutions for a very specific business objective that we had. And this drove us into finding that the gamification is a much more concept than what I initially had in my mind. So after this research and understanding when we could apply gamified experiences, I would say that at every stage of the process, you can think of including gamified experiences. Even on an MVP, maybe a progress bar on your onboarding that might be of 2 or 3 screens, because you need to make things very simple, might help user. You might be creating a more satisfying experience for that user with very little and very small things. Then if we think of a more evolved digital product with much more features and functionalities, all along the process, every time you are making research about, I don't know, how to improve a specific flow, how to include a different entire new section into my digital product, the research based on what are the user's pains, what are the user motivations into having that, let's say, that new section. When working on the solution, we can always think on how we can gamify at least one part of that experience of that specific solution. If I am having a social app with one-on-one connections, at least for now, and my next milestone regarding product development is including communities, how can I gamify the experience of people getting into communities so that that transition is smoother for them and more satisfying? So going to the point of your question, I would say that every time you make research, that it should be all along the project and the life cycle of, or on the life of the project, all across product development. While you are developing, you should always be doing research on what comes next. When building that solution, always have in mind gamification, because with very small things, you can improve a lot the experience of the user on that new flow on the product.
That's a great segue as we speak about the user. I mean, let's speak a little bit about the user benefits. We've danced around it a little bit, a bit around the psychological part, right? I mean, we know there is an addictive component to gamification. It certainly makes products more fun to use, which is certainly a benefit to the user. But let's speak a little bit about the pros and cons of that from the user and for the user.
Sorry, Trace, can I add something to the last question? Sorry.
Yeah, sure, go right ahead.
I think Phil says something key is that there is no a best moment to implement gamification, right? Because sometimes we were applying things related to gamification, but we didn't know, right? We have a progression bar or things like that, and that's gamification too. Gamification doesn't mean that we need to redesign the entire app, right? Means that it's a solution for a problem, right? But between other solutions, right, we can think about other things, right? But I think it's key to bear in mind that we can apply gamification to a specific part that our product, right, might be a website, might be a mobile app, or might be a virtual reality, right? Now that I studied that. And something to mention, something fun to mention to this question is that, for instance, in virtual reality is something that is called first 30 seconds, right? And the same happens to the mobile apps, right? If you install an app, you have a few seconds to discover what things you can do, right? And for instance, the onboarding there, it's key, right? You need to bear in mind that the onboarding is going to explain you how to use the app, for instance. But it's not the same to have an onboarding that has images and text, right? And then I press next, or skip, right? That is common on the onboarding process. Then we are going to see an example related to that onboarding where we have a cupcake, and once you complete a task, the cupcake is happy, right? And then it's engaging, right? And well, I was saying that we have something in virtual reality called first 30 seconds. And in those first 30 seconds, you need to be smart, right? You need to explain the users, you need to play with the narrative, something that is called story arc. It's important there. So bear in mind that we have a few seconds to keep the user engaged, right? At least at the first time. And that's it.
Okay, go back before we're out of time, and I also want to get to any questions from the audience. Let's talk about this psychological pros and cons. Mauro, haven't heard from you at all. Come off mute and give us some thoughts on the psychological part of this.
Well, we have different bias that we try to solve through gamification. For example, we have the endowed progress effect. This is a way to reduce this bias is when we, for example, show a competition bar. This idea, as Sophie already said, we need to think in this competition because our mind has to complete all before to start again. Always we see these different tools in most of the management tool, but nowadays in social media we have those resources. Another way to reduce friction points on the onboarding, for example, is say Warnick effect. Is something psychological again, obviously, and the idea is to trigger the user to complete and make a creation something. So, for example, I don't know, an onboarding or creation a profile. Again, we need to trigger the user to complete different actions, and it's a simple resource for our side, for the designers to think in some visual cues or something visual to trigger the user to complete different tasks. As Axel said, probably is a simple solution, but we can think, and we need to be going deeper about the action we try to make the user do in different flows. Well, we have a few examples about that, but I think that the most important are the endowed process and the Zeigarnik effect are the most common bias we try to solve with the gamification elements.
Makes sense. That it's a great lot to think about there. Mauro,
Yeah,
I have you.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I would like to add something very short to that related to why gamification uses a lot of basic psychology. It's because if we want to think that we want to create good, a better experience for user that is more satisfying, the reason why gamification uses psychology is because our brain releases a chemical component that is dopamine, and the body releases that chemical component when we experience something that is enjoyable or satisfying for us. So everyone wants to use gamification for releasing dopamine in our users' brains and creating that satisfying experience. But something I want to mention related to this is when we were doing research, I remember reading an article that mentioned that it's good to always try to generate good emotions and like good motivations on our users. We sometimes need to also create like bad feelings, let's say. If we think about scarcity, for example, if we make a good like points, rewards, whatever, scarce in our product, the user will want more about it. A very clear example is on booking.com. If you want to rent a house or an apartment or a room, they use like it's only one left, and that scarcity drives the user into, okay, I need to book it now because I will lose it. That's psychology, and they use that gamifying elements to impact on the brain of those users and make them perform the action they want them to perform, that it's to rent or to book that room. So it's not about only generate positive emotions. It's of course a balance. We don't want users to get frustrated and get out of our products crying, of course not. But it's finding what is the best in order to achieve that goal we have.
That's a great example. I think, we think about dopamine, we think about thrill seeking, we think about that, and scarcity or that call to urgency or that need to react is thrilling in a different way, or in a less traditional way. I'm going to put this out to all three of you. We'll go real quick. I see there's a question, but I want to, we've mentioned Duolingo, just mentioned, around around booking. All three of you, just some quick examples of where you're seeing gamification tactics successfully deployed in products in the marketplace. Sophie, you have a couple, or Axel, you have a couple? Maro, I ask all three.
Yeah, sure. I have a couple of questions to show you. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I think the admin needs to allows me to share my screen, right?
Okay, well, let's do it verbal so we can get to the question. You have a couple of examples?
Oh, here. Yeah, I can share my screen now.
Yeah, well, this is an example for a very previous version of Airbnb. Here is this a solution they found for solve this enjoy progress effect I was talking about. This idea is the competition gives the user a sense of progression, so they will more likely to have the motivation to complete the task. In that specific example is to complete their own profile, but it could be any progression bar for anything. This is a good resource for user engagement and user retention too. This idea to be more funny and enjoyable experience, and you don't feel you have a difficult task to do. In the next example,
here the sense of competition is key for a user, right? They say that we have one step left, right? And what happens next, right? So I think it's great.
Yeah, here is the example that Axel was talking about. This idea is, again, the onboarding is a friction point in every single digital product. And most of the time, the user just only pass through one step to another. But in that case, this is a application called Carousel. They use this onboarding process, adding a task list. And this is in order to avoid the tension when you have to complete a task and complete task, sorry. Again, motivate the user to complete a profile creation. It's so similar to the previous example, trigger the psychological process for the user. And again, is good resource for retention and engagement. and has the additional to the animation, so it's more visual and easy to understand what happened when you are completing the task, because the image are respond to that action.
Yeah, the cupcake is getting happy, right? Once you complete the task. Yeah.
Right. And all this is in the report, and I'm gonna I apologize, I'm gonna cut you off on the example so we can answer some of the user questions in the time that we have left. You know, the first one's a two-part question from Vlad. It's a great question about age segments. Is there a difference in the approach for 18 to 25-year-olds compared to 30 to 50 inside of this same app? You know, let's go speed round on this. Sophie, I'll ask you for part one of that question.
Yeah, I'm thinking of an example. I don't have right now one in order to give us an example, but I would say that absolutely yes. If companies are using properly gamification and they find there's a difference on their audience segment regarding motivation, they should change the gamified elements they are using, because younger people might be driven into performing or expecting different outcomes from a gamified experience rather than people from a different age or geographically located in a different place. So again, sorry, I don't have an example right now. I will think about it, but I'm sure that if companies are implementing gamification properly, the answer would be yes. There should be having different elements.
Right.
Yeah,
and Vlad, we have your contact info from your registration, so we'll definitely follow up with the report and any examples that we come with. Axel, I'm going to ask you the next one. Comes from Emmanuel. Do you think gamification will be used in business-to-business solutions, or would it only be applicable to products that are used by consumers? So do you see a B2B possibility?
Well, I think it's a remarkable question. I mean, we need to think about that gamification is just a solution, right? It doesn't matter if it is a product or a B2B process, right? We need to understand why we are going to implement gamification, which is our problem, right? Which is our business objective, right? This is only a solution. We have a lot of solutions as well that we could apply, but I definitely say that, yes, of course, you can apply it to B2B solutions.
Great. Yeah, great. All right, we only have a couple minutes left. Meryl, I'm going to ask you the final question. Not coming from our users, but coming from something we're all thinking about. What do you predict sort of as the future for gamification, right? We've seen a lot of tactics, we've seen it evolve, you've given some great examples. What do you think comes, what do you predict comes next?
I think virtual reality. We are in the middle of the, as Axel said, gamification is for everyone. The goal is to be more enjoyable, the experience using a device, a platform, wherever you are using, thinking in the digital product, and the immersive experience of virtual reality, I think, is the top of the next generation, probably thinking to different resources of gamification, because it's based on those things that we are talking about. As it's the same, but take it to a bigger scenario, if I have to say. But the expert is Axel, of course. But I think the gamification in the big stage is virtual reality, and social media need a lot of those elements to build a community and connect with others. This is the main goal of the social media. So in my opinion, I think this is the future.
Yep. Axel, I'm sorry to say it, but I'll give you 30 seconds to follow up on that if you have thoughts about the future.
Yeah, of course. Well, we are in the middle of the era, right, where we are using nowadays a lot of mobile applications for a lot of things, right? But I think what is next, of course, is virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And of course, we have that technology nowadays since a lot of years ago, right? But now we need to prepare for the next generation and technology, because we are going to be immersive in new worlds, right? And then gamification is key, right? We have a lot of companies, popular companies like Roblox, for instance, if you want to look for afterwards, that they have a lot of users and they are using gamification. Of course, it's a little bit complex that a mobile app, because you are going to interact with a story arc or narrative there. So probably you are going to need a director there. But I think the next thing that are waiting for us is virtual reality, right? We can imagine a lot of things there.
Well, it sounds collectively, that's what we're thinking. Sophie, sorry to not get your final thoughts, but let everybody get back to their day jobs. Thank you everyone who attended. These things always like, where's the time go? But as mentioned, we will follow up with the report that's been prepared by Axel, Sophie, Maru, and the rest of the team. And please feel free to reach out with any questions, or if you'd like to have a deeper discussion with us. As you can see, the team's super passionate about this topic, and we'll be happy to do that with you. So thank you again for attending, and hope to see you next month on our next webinar. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.